Yo, this is the review video. Okay, let's see if I can move through the slides. All right, here are all the embarrassing photos of me. We'll move past all of that. All right, cool. Just a quick recap. First slide here, we got the definition of economics. All right, so it's a science that studies institutional behavior, right? The behavior we're looking at where the way that we make decisions as a society or how we consume and how we allocate our resources, knowing that everything is finite, right? Nothing's unlimited. Um, Everything is slowly ticking away, right? Or at least is in a cycle that makes it. So we have to think about how to properly allocate, right? So these are two different definitions, but if you got number two down, you're pretty much good to go. All right. So it's a study of how we make our decisions and choose wisely. All right. Um, we handled a lot of this with the concept of scarcity at the beginning of the course with two or three goofy little things like the surviving in Alaska simulation. In other classes, you might do like an icebreaker where it's like you're stranded on the moon and you only have a certain set number of resources that you can pick from. But it's really just supposed to make you think about, if you choose one thing, you're giving up another, right? And the next best decision is your opportunity cost. You're the next best alternative is your opportunity cost, all right? Um, and what happens is that scarcity necessitates choice, right? It makes you decide, it makes you think, it makes you pick, right? And so this is what drives human decision making, and it drives economies forward, all right? Um, and something that's often associated in textbooks with the concept of scarcity shortly after is this crazy looking acronym TINSTAFL, right? Or there is no such thing as free lunch. Basically meaning that even when we think something's free, it's not. There's some way, an interconnection in which there is a loss or somebody's paying for it, right? Um, if it's a coupon, nope, not really. You have to buy one to get the other one free. So it's not free. It comes at the cost of one, right? Or if something is quote unquote free, somebody's suffering a loss, right? It might be the time that you lost, or the business, or the person making it, or the person doesn't get the tip, all of that good stuff, all right? Swag. All right, and here's just the whole thing broken down again. So human desire has unlimited wants, but what the earth can provide is limited. Therefore, there is a scarcity which makes us have choices, and the three basic questions being what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. And these are the three things you guys will be considering throughout the course. They're driving, or the major three macroeconomic, um, questions that greatly and largely influence decision making. Also, low key, you guys should totally peep this amazing color scheme. Everything in here, minus the green, is low key reflected in this photo. Just saying. All right. We had a question of the day. We had another question of the day. That was a simulation. All right, here's the opportunity cost one more time. So the next best decision is your opportunity cost. So the loss of gain from your alternative is the opportunity cost, right? So you had a decision of studying or watching TV, right? If you choose to study, the opportunity cost was the ability to watch TV. Or maybe it was your ability to sleep, because that's certainly another option, right? Or vice versa. Sometimes you guys make the smart or sometimes foolish decision to sleep instead of studying. But you evaluated everything, the pros, the cons. Sorry, I'm yawning. And then you guys decide from there. And the weird game that you psychologically play, where you're going, oh man, maybe I should have done this because I lost out on that. Whatever you think you lost out on is that, or that potential gain that you lost is the opportunity cost. Woo! Here's the other questions broken down again: the what to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce. Um, I honestly think that you can review these three questions relatively simply without me going too far into it. All right. Factors of production will take some time on because we got to nail these down, all right? So the four overarching factors of production are land, capital, labor, and entrepreneurs. We'll start with land and labor, and then we'll get to capital. We'll end with entrepreneurs, all right? So land, aka gifts of nature, are natural resources. So water, fields, stones, diamonds, gravel, tree, lumber, right? All that stuff. Sunshine, oxygen, carbon dioxide, natural gases, all of that. It's fixed and there is a limited supply. And when you get the argument of, the everything can be replenished. Not really, because sometimes we move too quickly and consume too fast. The cycle isn't able to resupply um, the reserves, right? Labor is simply the people and their efforts. So they're all the people that are not the entrepreneurs. They are not the ones who came up with the idea. They're not the ones spearheading the business or the venture. They're everybody else. So let's be honest, it's me, it's cashiers, it's common workers, accountants, PR people, HR, to an extent, actors, because they're working for somebody else, right? Um, Basically people that aren't your Steve Jobs, your Warren Buffetts, your small business owner that came up with its own product or service. Everybody but the last three things I said are part of labor. Um, Now, there's certain laws we'll start to look at over time. We're going to read about, I forget his first name right off the top of my head. I think it's David Ricardo and Thomas Malthus, who are both two theorists who talk about inequality, and they talk about labor and how the labor pool varies over time and adjusts to supply and demand. We'll be talking about that a little bit in the next unit. So we know that the labor pool grows based on population growth, famine, war, disease, and what we just talked about today, institutional norms. So should the rules of the game be ensured, that can greatly affect the direct labor supply for business. All right. Um, the next one we got capital, right? So tools, equipment, machinery, factories used in the production of goods and services. What's also weird is that capital makes capital, right? Machines make other machines. So capital can be used to finance or create more capital. There's also a thing called financial capital, which you get by branching out to investors, and that's the money used to buy these things. All right. Very important for startups. Typically, I think the starting capital is under 10 grand for most entrepreneurs, which is not that much money. Sorry, I'm yawning so much. It's a rough time of day for me. All right. I normally get up at like 4. Entrepreneurs are risk takers in search of profits. They are the ones spearheading, driving economies forward. And without entrepreneurs, capitalism simply cannot exist because society is never innovating and changing. All right. Um, they recombine and reorder old ideas into new, and they make it so that we are able to progress forward. Swag. All right. Now, economic goods and services that are useful. We have different types of goods. So we have consumer goods, which are intended for final use. Think of it. You are done, or when you're done with it, you're final, or when the company's done with it, you're finally able to consume it, right? Capital goods are the manufactured goods used to produce other goods. Um, it starts everything off like a capital letter in the beginning of a sentence. Durable good, something that lasts 3 years. If you think about what the word durable means, it literally means that it can last. And then non-durable cannot last more than 3 years. And then I just have three different examples. We got a consumer good with Supreme, if you're following my cursor. We have capital goods. And then we have the Swagmobile itself, the '01 Honda Odyssey, um, which is a durable good lasting for more than 3 years, often lasting almost 20 years. All right. There's also the concept of economic scarcity due to consumption levels. Hold on while I blast this up so I can get the animations in. So you guys know what services are, which is work performed by for someone. We know what a consumer is, people who use the good and services, and consumption is simply the process of consuming or using. Now, something that's interesting is conspicuous consumption, which is, I guess, pretty blatant and in your face and ingrained in American society of us getting things or buying things that we really don't need, whereas many people don't have enough things like food or warm clothing or adequate material. Just something to always keep in the back of your mind. See somebody, give them something. All right. As we're in this introductory unit, we need to define value clearly, which is just worth that can be expressed in dollars and cents or an agreed upon value, right? So if it's not going to be expressed in dollars and cents, the ability to barter or come up with a system of valuing, right? Like, one chicken leg for like 10 water bottles, if that's the only two things we got, right? And if we understand value, we can start understanding the paradox of value, which is pretty wild because if you'll follow my cursor, it will allow us to understand why this absolutely horrendously ugly, stupid, swagged out piece of jewelry is so much more expensive and apparently necessary than the multi gallons of water. All right. So, water, something that is technically scarce and not always clean, it needs to be cleaned, it needs to be refined and perfect, it is essential to human life, might not cost that much, but something that literally does nothing but provide happiness and apparently swag or bling bling um, can have high value. And that's because we need to understand the concept of utility. As long as something is useful and or capital or provides satisfaction, it has value. So if it's very scarce and has utility, right? It provides satisfaction. It has an increased value like diamonds. If it's slightly less scarce but still can be utilized for something and in certain areas maybe is more abundant, you'll see a decrease in the value, like water. Um, Now, obviously, this gets a little hard to do at a societal level because we have varying interpretations of things or things that we want and need, right? Um, we'll define wealth in the bottom, which is simply just the accumulation of products that are tangible, scarce, useful, and transferable from person to person. And we usually see that as assets and money. So if you got a lot of money, a lot of property, a lot of cool fancy cars and clothes and all of that, you have accumulated products. And the most liquid asset of all, liquid meaning like can transfer hands and be used for wealth and value, cash, you're wealthy. Adam Smith defines this in his Wealth of Nations in 1776 and believes that people and their skills are the most essential thing to provide wealth to a nation. Like you could have limited land, limited capital, even limited labor, but if you have a few entrepreneurs, the people can restore everything. We got to this. I'm actually going to move past that. Okay, here we go. Today we just talked about all of this good jazz, right? So let's hypothetically use the two-sector model of the circular flow of economic activity, right? And we got businesses over here on our left and individuals on the right. And they're going to interact in two different places, the product market and the factor market. Now, as you see, when they go to the product market, that's where consumers spend their money and where the businesses provide their goods and services, right? So it's where, you know, if businesses are trying to make money, they're selling fidget spinners, iPods, um, Instagram goods or whatever, and sweatshirts and hoodies and all the other stuff that you guys use, right? And that's where we spend our stupid money on stupid things, right? Which means income to businesses. Capiche, capuche. All right. So when businesses make money, they can then start to buy more resources, whether it be for following my cursor, and those things that they might buy with the money they get from consumers might be more land. They might use it to invest in more machinery or more financial capital, and or they might employ more people. Did I say employ? Yeah, employ more people. My bad. Or they might take a chance with a new entrepreneur or an innovative thinker. Cool. So, and the next, when they spend on these four things, that often results in income for people, whether it be people that sell land, people that make machines, people that need jobs or opportunity for entrepreneurs. So that becomes income that later gets spent back at the product market, right? And so individuals provide that, which means that businesses get the productive resources right over here, right? So they can then make goods and services to provide at the product market, which we then give to the individual. And it's a nice little flow. Woo! All right, good. Now, we talked about, what happens when this stops. Like this economic downturn, what we're gonna see is, a few people, not by a few people, I'm talking, let's say, I don't know, in a nation of 10 million people, 50,000 panic and start saving and hoarding. And it starts a ripple effect of people starting to save and hoard, right? So a few businesses start to fall. They jack up their prices. People can't afford it. Then they can't afford to keep producing. So then they start firing people. And then they start firing people, and people don't have any more money. And then they won't go spend because they keep on hoarding because they realize that they might lose their job or other people might lose their job. And then people can't pay back interest rates, or nor can businesses, and banks start to fail, and then there's bank runs, so now your banking system's ruined, your business is ruined, and then the government steps in, and people upset the government, and people start becoming extreme, and all things go crashing to a halt until we finally have something like government spending to try and save it. Cool. Now, same model, except we just switched up the words and we switched up the order. It's like a mirror image, right? So now instead of businesses, we're using the word firms, and households over here. We see the same thing, same cycle, just a little bit more explicit. Um, and we have added another sector. So this is the three sector, one, two, three. All right. So we have the government sector, right? And what they get is taxes from firms and individuals, income taxes from both these two things, or property taxes, right? And those still go back to us, and the government will divvy up those extra refund or those extra funds in, tax refunds or public goods like, roads, sidewalks, buses, and all that good stuff, right? Public education, water, or they'll give subsidies to, jack up prices to support and give incentive to farmers, or to think about, green alternatives, or to protect a certain industry, that to keep a certain segment of the nation um, employed. All right. We practice economic growth by using the PPF model. So it's a nation's output increasing over time, right? So more output over a standard amount of time. Productivity, just a measure of output produced with given inputs in a specific amount of time. So increased output plus same, or a specific amount of input plus a specific amount of time, right? The division of labor, you naturally do this. You guys have learned how to do this. You started doing it when we had each table represent a mini nation with a folder and different materials. You guys do it all the time. You don't even realize it because it just makes that much sense to you now. It's ingrained in you. You guys do a car simulation in freshman year during the Industrial Revolution. You guys learn about this and do it and practice it when you guys make your floats by, separating out people who fold the paper, people who make the flowers, people who assemble, people who work on the wooden structures, right? It would make no sense for each person to work on each and every single one individual flower from start to finish. So you guys divvy up the process and it makes a whole lot more sense. And you guys see how efficient it is here, where, before using it, somebody or a few people were trying to make one car per day. When you start divvying up the process, one car can be made in 90 minutes. It also reduces costs because your workers are more replaceable. They're easier to train. They're easy to educate. So you're despecializing in a sense because it's not somebody that knows all these different processes. They know a couple simple tasks. And so things get cheap. All right. Some things that can determine productivity is the physical capital, like machines, equipment, the structures that happen, that places have, or human capital, like the skills and knowledge that your workers actually have. And one of the things that a lot of businesses are trying to do, especially in service-based economies like the U.S., we don't really sell that many goods now. We sell more skill-based things, or I guess we would say the online world, even though technically a good, is more of a service because you're doing something with it. So, how to, speed up the consumption process by creating more algorithms. So you can need human capital for that. Natural resources, that one. And technological knowledge would being like the best way to produce something for goods and services at a societal level. Um, like, having the proper amount of books, the proper amount of engineers to make machines, or access to that, or access to the internet. Um, Diminishing returns is simply in production when, or even utility, I guess, like adding a little bit more input doesn't make it all that much greater. So it's like when you start realizing as you're making flowers during float season that having one more person isn't really doing all that much, right? So you have one person working on flowers, right? It's taking forever. So you add one more person. Now you're really increasing how many flowers you're making. That's great. You do three, things are going faster. They're going swimmingly. You add four, it's getting better. Five, six, seven, eight, nine, great. But do you really need all 45 people that show up at Float making flowers? No. That 43rd, 4th, 5th aren't really maximizing how much you're making. It's going to take a while for them to get the rest of it, and they could probably start or help speed up the process of the entire project by working on something else, right? So there's a certain limit, and we see that with that production possibilities curve, where we're starting to see that one incremental unit isn't gonna start really changing anything too much. Um, or another way to explain it, I guess, would be like that first slice of pizza when you're starving compared to the eighth, right? It just isn't the same over time. Or the concept of exercise. If anybody does fitness, we all talk, like you hear a lot of things on the internet about beginner gains when people start eating right for the first time and start working out when they never have. And they get, they see a lot of quick results very quickly as their body adjusts, but then they have to rethink and they have to realize that there's only so many sets that you can do or only so many inputs that you can before you have to start changing things and rethinking how you do it. Um, there's also the catch-up effect where countries that start off poor grow more rapidly than rich countries because their inputs have a greater effect. Essentially, like, um, third world countries right now or countries that are struggling right now have a chance of seeing rapid increase because the spread or the gap is so large, but the access to that knowledge is huge. It's no different than, if you score a zero on a test and you take a retake and you get like a 10, that is tremendous growth compared to somebody that got a 90 and gets 100. Or even like the zero to the, if you get a 50 and you jump up to an 80 versus a 75 to like an 85, I don't know, something just feels, I don't know if that's a great explanation, but you're starting to feel the difference a little bit there. All right. Those are just some things back when I was trying to fill time, but didn't do that. Positive and normative statements. But, I'll just cover it up, I guess. Why not? So, um, economists use two different types of statements. Even our politicians do, right? So, positive statements are simply descriptive. And what economists are trying to do are trying to figure out or really first describe how the world is. So they'll offer something that is simply descriptive. And then when they start becoming policymakers and advisors to governments or suggesting a solution, that's when they're getting into normative statements. All right. We didn't spend a whole lot of time on that. Um, okay. GDP, you guys started searching this for your projects. Um, there's 1,000 other things that are probably better than GDP to figure out the real health of an economy. Now, if this was like a totally public YouTube, I'd probably get slammed for this. GDP is probably the best at understanding economic health. However, with the world that we live in, where we don't have to go to encyclopedias and like sift through library racks, there is no reason why we can't get a better picture by getting more data, right? We shouldn't just take the GDP and see and go, oh, it's doing great. We need to understand, mortality rates, crime rates, poverty rates, the inequality gap, opportunity for its people. There's so many other things that go into this. So understanding economic health is a multifaceted issue, and it can't just simply be by understanding the gross domestic product, which is simply how much a country is able to produce within a year. Boom. So GDP per capita is attained by taking the GDP of the country and then dividing it by its average population for the year. So it gives you like a false-ish or a rough idea of what the average salary is in a country. So like the U.S., I think it's like $56,000 or something like that. The real GDP is just a measurement of economic output that accounts for the effects of inflation or deflation. What that means is with real GDP is you're using a base year. So if you didn't use real GDP and you used nominal GDP, every single year it would look like a country is doing better and better and better because of inflation, right? For a lot of places. What real GDP does is it takes inflation into account by trying to remove the effects of inflation. That's a kind of confusing statement because it's taking it into effect or into account by removing it and its effects. All right, so that's real GDP. And so we use GDP when we're looking or trying to compare year to year GDP, right? So, like, how the US has done with GDP from 1980 to 2020. Oh my God, it's 2020. So, yeah, 1980 to 2020, year by year, or even just those 2 years, we'd use real GDP. Whereas if we're just trying to look at how the US is doing between quarter 1 of 2020 and quarter 3 or quarter 4 of 2020, we would use nominal. We started talking about institutions, I believe, which are just the rules and procedures that structure social interactions by constraining enabling actors' behaviors. Institutions is a really hard thing because you're going to see 1,000 different things on the internet. So they're both formal and informal, and they're also abstract or to an extent concrete. Not to get too complex here, but we see them as laws, regulations, legal agreements, contracts, and constitutions. We also see them in just like the inherent agreements that we have, how we understand how things work as a society, like driving on the proper side of the road. As one of our students, I don't say any names, so there's no creepos that can find you guys on the internet, but we use an example of driving on the right side of the road. That is something, if you're following the cursor, that is in law, in regulations, and is agreed upon, right? But it's also a norm and a practice and a procedure because on the roads that don't have lines, what's really stopping you from going wherever? Well, you still do it anyways, or you tend to hug the right side of the road when there is a narrow road that only fits a car because you are so used to these norms, procedures, and or expect somebody else to do that because we're looking for predictable behavior. So for economics, what we need is the rule of law, private property rights, open and competitive markets, and entrepreneurship and innovation. So the rule of law, the idea that justice will be upheld, that I can't kill you, you can't kill me, that if I steal from you, you can take me to court and I will be properly punished, or if I economically spite you for no reason and it violates your constitutional rights, that it will be upheld and you will be righted. Private property rights are important, that you can create wealth from what you own, or that you can work and gain something and it can be yours so long as you're not infringing on somebody else's rights, that the government will take it from you or the government will protect you in keeping those things. Open and competitive markets are important, that people understand that they have a chance to go out and make a product or provide a service that is unique or in a niche area to, better society, because theoretically competition meets the needs of society because people are trying to figure out what people want, right? Which then leads us into entrepreneurship and innovation, that there's ample opportunity for innovation, which really means people are able to, when they see the opportunity to actually get investment and, start the career of their dreams or provide an interesting idea for the market. We take all these things for granted often. Anyways, that's pretty much the synopsis of this entire thing. I've been going for a while. I'm going to shut up now. Have a great day.